It was about halfway through 2021 when Capcom released its follow-up to Resident Evil 7. Described as the next generation of survival horror, Resident Evil Village made its way into our homes while pandemic fears were still a hot topic. For Ontario, Canada, this time acted as a peak for COVID. Businesses were closed or practicing social distancing, and you needed a vaccination passport to be let into certain places. You were meant to stay home, and that's what I did. I hopped onto the computer, I opened Steam, and I downloaded Resident Evil 8 for the first time. Admittedly, I didn't know what to expect, though Resident Evil 7 made a name for itself by reintroducing the horror elements to the series, but I couldn't turn a blind eye to Resident Evil 5 and 6. I really had high expectations, and after 5 minutes of gameplay, I knew I was playing a great game, if not the best Resident Evil entry. This was a chapter in Resident Evil history that had yet been touched upon and acts as a crucial entry to the series as we know it. It stood out from previous iterations of the game by widening its scope of terror. No longer was Resident Evil a story of zombie outbreaks. No. Now the series acted as a gothic horror with further aspects of body, psychological, monster, grotesque, mechanical, and familiar horrors. These many aspects of this game kept gameplay fresh by sending you into a new subgenre of horror for the next couple hours of gameplay. I also feel this game removes a lot of barriers to entry that some previous games had established. You could pop this game in and have a self-contained playing experience, with only a few questions that would lead you to play only Resident Evil 7. So, what's the story of the game? Well, going forward, there will be spoilers, so click away now, but if you're interested, stick around. I'm Fuji, and for more video game related content, please subscribe. Raising their newborn daughter, protagonists of Resident Evil 7, Mia and Ethan Winters, enjoy their new home life, though there seems to be a bit of tension between the two parents, due to Mia not wanting to discuss what happened to her in the previous game. Ethan sits for dinner when this picture-perfect life is shattered by an assassination. Shot in front of him, Mia stands in shock, only to be unloaded upon by the assassins. And through the haze and the gun smoke, a figure steps forward, Chris Redfield. Once a hero to Ethan, now a villain. Chris kidnaps Ethan and his daughter Rose and drive off into the snow. But something happens to the vehicle, and when Ethan awakens, he finds himself in a mysterious village in search for his daughter. Exploring through the town, he finds remnants of a life past, as though everyone just up and gone. Continuing, Ethan ends up finding some survivors, but it's too late. There is an infected amongst them, and Ethan seems to be in a town where old folklore is a reality. Whilst trying to gain entry to another section of the town, Ethan is attacked by someone and brought before Mother Miranda and the 4 lords of the village. Ultimately, Ethan is handed to Heisenberg and is part of his sick, twisted game. Heisenberg sends Ethan through a maze of werewolves, dead ends, and traps. Outsmarting Heisenberg, Ethan is able to survive and continue forth to Castle Dimitrescu, all while his enemies think he's dead. On this journey, Ethan meets the Duke, where he can purchase upgrades and weapons from him. And if you're lucky and hang around long enough, you will get a reference to Resident Evil 4's Merchant, with a "What are you buying?" quote. Onward through the castle, we learn the story of the First Lord, Lady Dimitrescu. Though this story infers that Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters are bug-like creatures, the sequence is very reminiscent of early literature, vampire and gothic horror stories. Lured by cult leader Mother Miranda, Dimitrescu is experimented on to see if she is a viable host for Mother Miranda's parasite. Laying waste to the daughters of Dimitrescu, Ethan enrages Dimitrescu, leading to an incredible rooftop battle, which ends in her death. Ethan grabs a flask of material and heads back into the village. Speaking with the Duke once more, he learns the horrible truth. He has his daughter in the flask. His daughter has been torn limb from limb and placed into these vials. The only way to save Rose is to retrieve her parts from each of the remaining lords. That's when Ethan travels on to meet the second Lord in a separate part of the map, Donna Beneviento, the doll maker. Donna was experimented on by Mother Miranda, giving her the ability to create powerful hallucinogenic substances, leading Ethan further into her trap. A dollhouse where she can play with her victims. Ethan's weapons are stripped from him, and he is left in an escape room type basement where he has to outwit his enemy and solve emotional puzzles from his past. Weaponless, Ethan must survive the most horrifying scene in any Resident Evil game to date, the fetus sequence. Ethan manages to solve the puzzles and survive the fetus, but the story isn't over yet. He must now kill Beneviento and retrieve the next flask. He chases the doll embodiment of Donna and strikes a pair of scissors through her, leaving her lifeless. Ethan heads to the third Lord, Moreau, fittingly named after what I believe to be the Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, which is a story about a man who mutates and dysmorphs animals into grotesque beings, just like Moreau himself. Ethan gains entry by answering a few puzzles and stealing the flask from the stupid Moreau, but Moreau has something up his sleeve and surrounds Ethan with a nasty fish gunk, which he can create after being modified by Mother Miranda. He leads Ethan to a field and battles him by raining an acid fish substance. Ethan dodges these burns and manages to outsmart Moreau, finishing him once and for all. Now he can go forward to the fourth Lord, Heisenberg. But this one is different. When Ethan returns back to the village, he notices it's changed. Heisenberg wants to play with him. Ethan battles through Heisenberg's showing grounds and proves himself worthy to be Heisenberg's partner. You see, Heisenberg wants to take down Mother Miranda and be the leader for himself. Ethan refuses and is pushed into Heisenberg's factory, filled with Frankenstein monsters, half robot, half human experiments. Ethan finds his hardest battle yet, and just as Ethan goes to fight Heisenberg, he meets Chris once again, and the truth is told. Miranda, using her ability to shapeshift, turned herself into Mia. That is why Ethan had difficulties talking with her about her past, simply because Miranda didn't know what happened. Chris knew that Miranda was a bioweapon and attempted this assassination on her, but somehow Miranda survived. Chris explains that Mother Miranda is just like Dr. Moreau from H.G. Wells' story, The Island of Dr. Moreau. She uses the village to create freaks of nature and grotesque beings. Chris shows Ethan that Rose is with Miranda now, and he must finish the job. Ethan fights Heisenberg, but it's not so simple. When Mother Miranda modified him, he now gained the ability to mold with metal to control it, to create weapons from it, and this led to a valiant battle, ending in Heisenberg's destruction. Ethan hears Rose, but it's too late. Mother Miranda has come. As Ethan stands there, his heart gets ripped from his chest, and now Mother Miranda will turn Rose into her long-dead daughter, and Ethan falls to the ground, dead. The perspective of the story now changes to Chris Redfield and his team as he ventures into the village to kill Mother Miranda. As he heads into the depths of the village mines, Chris finds the Megamycete, the superorganism that infects its hosts with abilities, the core of the mold and the root of Miranda's powers. Chris puts explosives on it and goes onward to take out Miranda. On his way, he stops in her lab and learns of the experiments that made each of the lords the vile creatures they became, as well as the failed experiments. But he also finds Mia? Could this be? Chris's team has eyes on Miranda, so this isn't her. This must be the real Mia, used as an experiment. And when Chris tells Mia Ethan is gone, she goes quiet. There seems to be a little more to that story. She says Ethan is very special. Ethan, in the throes of death, rises, seeing visions of Evelyn from Resident Evil 7, mocking him, saying Miranda didn't kill you. You were killed by Jack 3 years ago, turned into a mold experiment. Hints of this were shown throughout the previous games, like stapling your hand back on and having your hand severed by Lady Dimitrescu and just using healing to put it back on. With his heart ripped out, Ethan rises to save Rose and is met by the Duke for one last time, offering one last chance to buy weapons and prep. Then the Duke sends Ethan on his way. Walking through the ruins of the village, Ethan walks to the ceremony site and is confronted by Mother Miranda. She has Rose. She believes for some reason that she can turn Rose into her daughter, Eva. But when the ceremony is completed, it's Rose, not Eva. Mother Miranda seems to have been weakened somehow, and now is the time to fight. Chris, from the high ground, shoots Mother Miranda in the head, causing her to transform into a monstrous being. The gunfight ensues, and the two of them go head to head. Mother Miranda gets hit once more and turned into a crumbling, dried mold statue. Rose is okay, and Ethan holds her. But as Miranda has died, so has the mold. Ethan is crumbling apart. Chris tries to help, but Ethan can't go on. The mold is reforming. Rose looks once more in the eyes of her father. Ethan takes the remote detonator for the charges Chris planted earlier and hands Rose to Chris, as well as Ethan's green jacket. The mold is getting stronger, and Ethan pushes Rose and Chris away to save their lives as he heads back into the mold-infested village. Chris takes Rose to the helicopter for safety. Ethan looks up at the Megamycete and presses the trigger. Mia gets Rose back, and Chris tells his team to take off. Mia asks, "Where's Ethan?" But it's too late. The explosion wipes out the entire village, and Mia gets the clue. "He stayed so we could all escape. I'm sorry," Chris says. Ethan sacrificed himself to save the world. And on the helicopter, we get a little hint that the BSAA isn't quite what they used to be, seeing as they sent a bioweapon soldier to fight. We get a time jump as Rose is now all grown up visiting Ethan's grave. It seems she's under some sort of government program using her for her powers. They drive off as a ghostly figure stands watching them. And that's the end of Resident Evil 8. Stick around until the very end because we do have some Easter eggs from the RE8 game. I'm M. Fuji, don't forget to subscribe. The release of this game was met with great praise as well as some condemnation. Capcom received many blessings for its use of the RE engine to really bring the environment and scares to life. The sound design made for an unsettling gameplay as the player felt always on edge, and the gameplay mechanics were familiar for returning players, but not overwhelming enough for a new player. Its pacing was listed as one of its great benefits, but the criticism came when comparing this to former Resident Evil entries, such as Resident Evil 4, which also took place in an Eastern European village and a castle and a lake. The combat mechanics were clunky and posed some difficulties to players during high-paced moments. But overall, this game was an incredible success. Though the budget hasn't been officially listed by Capcom, it's estimated that a AAA game like this costs $80 to $100 million to make, including marketing and distribution. Seeing as this game sold 5 million copies by October of its release year, it should have seen a return of about $300 million, not including DLCs and additional purchases. Resident Evil has been a staple of horror gaming since its release nearly 30 years ago, and though it's had its ups and it's had its downs, a game like Resident Evil Village has shown that the RE team has still got what it takes to make a relevant and strong story-driven horror. I, like many others, was blown away by this game, and I hope that Capcom takes its time with RE9 because this will be a tough game to follow, and I don't want them to rush some half-ass game. Now, as promised earlier in the video, the Easter eggs. The village, Duke, and typewriters are reminiscent of the Resident Evil 4 game. Ethan's hand seems to always be getting injured, like in Resident Evil 7 when he staples his hand back on. The mold is a reference from Resident Evil 7. There is a crest and statue puzzle as a nod to Resident Evil 1, and the umbrella symbol can be seen throughout the ceremony area. While Lady Dimitrescu's castle references Nosferatu and old vampire stories, Heisenberg's factory draws on the Frankenstein stories. Now this next one I've never personally seen. However, in Heisenberg's factory, there is an enemy that seems to be wearing a Mega Man helmet. Also, Heisenberg's powers are kind of like Nero's powers from Devil May Cry, being able to control metal and make weapons out of them. Now that's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Easter eggs, and if you have a favorite Easter egg that I missed, please link it down below. I'm M. Fuji and thanks for tuning into this retrospective. These videos are kind of hard to make, but I really enjoy making them, so if you like seeing them, please feel free to subscribe for more. I'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, subscribe. Hey, subscribe. Please.